everyone. Hello. Hello. Welcome to Policy Jam with Mayor Levar Stoney, an evening for the proudly wonky who don't like a soundbite. It's also an evening to inspire action for you to call the mayor's staff, call your council person, attend council committee meetings, although they're all in the afternoon, and to get involved way before any public hearing goes before City Council. I'm Susan Winecki from Richmond Magazine, and I had the pleasure of co-moderating the first Mayorathon Candidates Forum back in 2016. Joining me this evening is co-moderator Mariah Williams from the Spark Mill. But before we get started, we'd like to thank the ICA for serving as our host site this evening, and I'd like to introduce the ICA's Executive Director, Dominic Wilsden.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. I just want to say it's super exciting for the ICA to have the chance to host and co-sponsor this event. Really want to thank Susan Winecki from Richmond Magazine for bringing this event to us, and Ruth Morrison for coordinating. I'm a relative newcomer to this city, so I'm learning every day about what's going on here, and I'm just very excited to have the chance now to hear from Mayor Stoney about what's happening and what's coming. I want to say just finally, this is Richmond's new Institute for Contemporary Art. We have all year round exhibitions, performances, films. It's free admission, free programs, free membership. So if you haven't been here before, you don't really have a great excuse not to come back. So thank you, and enjoy the program.
Thank you, Dominic.
So how will this first time Policy Jam event go this evening? Well, the evening has been broken into 4 issue areas: environment, transportation, neighborhoods and safety, and youth and families. For each one, nonprofits have reviewed policies that the mayor and his administration undertook during his first 2 years in office, and those will be discussed with the mayor. These nonprofits have also put together 3 policy suggestions that you, the audience, will have an opportunity to weigh in on by applause throughout the evening. We'll wrap up the evening with audience questions around 8 p.m. And for those of you who have index cards, you can expect those to be collected about midway through the evening. Now, for each of the policies that have been reviewed, they've been given a rating based on their progress and given an emoji. For done and completed, it's been given the flex muscle emoji. For good progress, it's been given the fingers crossed emoji. For need some work, it's been given the wrench and the hammer. And for no movement, it's received a different type of movement, and that is this little guy. Now, we don't expect the mayor or city council, for that matter, to make decisions on the policy suggestions this evening. Instead, 12 suggestions will be sent to our elected leaders, and they will have 2 weeks to respond. And those answers will become publicly available at richmondmag.com/Mayorathon2. Don't worry, we will share that at the end. I don't expect you to remember it. Now, without further delay, and because you haven't come to see us here, please join us in welcoming Mayor Levar Stoney.
Oh, thank you.
I like it. Wind.
Change for a little drink.
Wind.
Yeah.
What's the wind?
Oh, there's some beer here.
And that's the wind.
That is. Drink up.
So Mayor Stoney, you know, Mayorathon wouldn't be a Mayorathon without a few twists. So to start things off, and to in your honor of your honor's visible presence around the city, we have this fashion video review for you by Dirty Richmond. Roll the tape, please.
Good evening, RVA. Brian McDaniel here from Dirty Richmond and Blue Bones Vintage. For the last 2 years, we've been following the fashion ups, downs, I don't know, of Mayor Levar Stoney. Let's start off with the mayor doing some chair aerobics with our senior citizens. You see the basic mayoral uniform, white shirt, necktie, but we got a little something special going on here with those hats. Maybe next time, just go all out with leg warmers and a headband. This is a segment we like to call Good Plaid, Bad Plaid, or Glad Plaid, if you will. Glad. This color combination, it just works. Glad. Levar Stoney, really patriotic, but saved the flag color combination for July 4th. Mayor Stoney even has wardrobe in his office. Here, athletic wear and a helmet. He's ready to go into battle on the budget at a moment's notice. We give him a fashion Heisman. During the last 2 years, we've experienced a lot of Mayor Stoney deja vu. White shirt, blue tie. White shirt, blue tie. White shirt, blue tie. White shirt, blue tie. Mayor Stoney, for the love of God, please just add some color. You'll never know where the mayor will show up next. Here he is inside animal care and control in a fine navy blue suit with our friend Trouser. Just some words of advice for the next 2 years? Snag-free fabrics, more lint brush.
Yeah.
This one is what we call one and done, or never again.
There you go.
So, are you glad you didn't wear a blue suit tonight?
I purposefully did not wear a blue suit tonight,
All right.
but I did bring a blue tie.
I see. Well, before you say never again to Policy Jam, let's jump into our first issue area of the night.
Okay.
The urban environment. And here is a list of the groups that worked on this issue area. So, of course, Richmond has many environmental assets, such as our beautiful James River, as most of us know. But we also have environmental challenges. We'll look at a bit of both in this area. And on the challenges side, let's take a look at where the heat islands are around the city. And for the audience, a heat island is an area in the city that is significantly hotter than its surrounding areas. So you can imagine this significantly impacts air quality and water quality in those areas. So here on the map, the deeper the red, the hotter the temperatures in the neighborhood. So let's jump into the first policy review and the corresponding emojis. So the mayor committed Richmond to an 80% reduction in pollution that contributes to global climate change by 2050 and launched the RVA Green 2050 planning process to implement this pledge. And nonprofits say that this is an area that needs work. So Mayor Stoney, you committed to this at a press conference in 2017. But when we look at other localities such as Washington, D.C. and Boston that have already passed climate action plans with specifics through Climate Ready D.C., Climate Ready Boston, can you talk about the progress on implementing this plan in the city of Richmond?
Yes, a lot of this work is being undertaken by our Office of Sustainability. And what they're working on right now is a social vulnerability study that will study, research the vulnerability, the 38 demographics and the vulnerabilities they have to extreme heat and also extreme precipitation as well. I think some forget that although we are not located on the coast like Norfolk and Virginia Beach, we will have impacts as well when it comes to climate change. In addition to that, though, we're also going to engage in a public process as well with the community on next steps on our climate action plan too. It's my hope that in my time as mayor, we can begin implementation, but we can't wait too long. And you all saw recently, Dock Street was underwater, which means that the James River is still alive and well.
All right, thank you. So moving on to policy number 2, Mayor Stoney has stated that the Richmond Riverfront Plan should be funded on an annual basis and committed to completing the Missing Link Trail project by the end of his first term. This trail is a pedestrian cyclist connection between the south end of the Potterfields Memorial Bridge and the 21st Street entrance to the James River Park system, which provides access to places such as Belle Isle, which unfortunately is an area of the city that some people do not get to enjoy. And nonprofits in this area gave you good progress. So how do you plan to convert this good progress into completion to fulfill your commitment to completing the Missing Link project?
So right now, I believe there's dollars in the budget for design and study at the moment for the Missing Link Trail. We have to, from there, move to implementation. That means more funding in the budget for that. I have talked about, and we'll talk about it further as well, the fact that we have a 5-year CIP, capital improvement plan, but beyond the 5-year capital improvement plan, we have to look at the city in a 20-year interval as well and commit to it. This is the Riverfront plan, but the Riverfront plan has to match with our CIP as well, and that's my commitment to keep that funded.
Okay, thank you. And finally, to our last policy review. Mayor Stoney and his administration also supported a healthy James River by completing a clean water plan in 2017 by raising the bar for how the city manages its sewer, stormwater, wastewater, and drinking water treatment systems. And you were given good progress in this area. So for those of you who were just as confused about this as I was when I learned, stormwater and wastewater in Richmond are combined and treated in the city's wastewater treatment plant before it flows into the James River. However, when capacity is reached, say during a storm, that water flows directly into the James River. And as you can imagine, this can lead to contamination and poor water quality of the river. So what are the next steps for this plan to ensure that the city's water systems are above standard and that our lovely assets can continue to be maintained, such as the James River?
Well, I think, I guess now 2.5 years when we did the Mayorathon at the VMFA, I spoke about the combined sewer overflow system that Richmond has, which is akin to the systems that are along river cities like Lynchburg, but also Pittsburgh as well. Alexandria as well. And I love the fact that there are congressmen, congresspeople from all across the country who come and look at what we're doing here in Richmond. Recently, we were the first locality in the Commonwealth of Virginia to be issued a municipal is MS4, a municipal separate sewer and storm water, separate sewer and storm water permit. It's the first. It's a mouthful. It's MS4, everybody.
MS4. I like that.
But you know, we have been the model for the Commonwealth, and we're going to continue being the model. There's going to be more investment into these sort of systems. There's a combined approach using our work of friends in the nonprofit sector, as well as the work we do in the Department of Public Utilities as well. It can't be done just by public utilities. It's to be done by the community and nonprofits working together too.
Thank you.
All right. So now let's move forward to the first of our 12 policy recommendations. So audience, as I'm going through the policy recommendations, be thinking on which of these is most pressing to you. We'll ask the mayor, and then I will weigh in on your response by applause. So the first policy suggestion from nonprofits in this area is to work to create new park facilities and urban agriculture sites so that every Richmonder is no more than 10 minutes from a green space. The second is to advance climate resilient and energy efficient development through stronger land use and development standards. So this ensures that developers counterbalance the potential impacts on the environment. And finally, to commit to specific clean energy, energy efficiency, and pollution reduction targets for the city's own energy use and take meaningful steps to achieve those targets. So Mayor Stoney, as you hear these policy suggestions, and I think you've hit on it a little bit, but can you talk about your plans to respond to either some or all of these, and why it's important for you and your administration to commit to pollution reduction and energy efficiency in the city of Richmond?
Yeah, I committed, along with a number of other mayors throughout the United States, to a 10-minute walk access for each resident in the city of Richmond. Right now, Richmond, when you look at the Trust for Public Land, we are ranked 58 out of 100 cities. I've told Chris Felke, the Director of Public Parks and Recreation, that I want to be on the other side of 50. Right now in the Commonwealth of Virginia, Virginia Beach, Norfolk, and Chesapeake, and the County of Arlington are ahead of us. That means we have to increase access, build new green spaces when we were talking about development as well, so that more and more neighborhoods have access. When you look at this access map, the southern part of the city, south side, their access is, they're in high need of better access. The places where the city annexed years and years ago are the places that do not have the sort of access to parks. We have to do better. And also, one that stood out to me as well was Scott's Addition. And I know we need to work on that too. A lot of cement, not a lot of green space in parks in Scott's Addition. When it comes to us playing a role in energy efficiency and the RVA Green RVA Green 2050, the city currently emits about 6%. 6% of the emissions is city related. All right, but I believe the city should be a model as well, and that's why as we think about the future in terms of the buildings that we manage and the buildings that we build moving forward in a 20-year capital improvement plan, we also look about greening those buildings as well. I've also requested that my staff take a look at greening our fleet too. Mm-hmm. And I want to eventually present a plan on how we go about purchasing more green vehicles for our fleet inside City Hall.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
So audience, how you feeling? Good? All right. So now we're going to ask you to weigh in on some of these policy suggestions. So and this is by round of applause. So for number 1, ensuring that every Richmonder is no more than 10 minutes from a green space. So if you are in support of that, let's hear it.
Did that register?
It's like the Apollo in here.
Please pass the mic. Number 2, ensuring that developers counter for the environmental impacts of their development. And number 3, committing to clean energy, energy efficiency, and pollution reduction in the city.
I think they all three had the same
I think
sort
so
of
too. I think
energy.
So too. Yeah,
behind
so
them.
Right.
they're all equally important. So remember that the 12 policy suggestions that you hear tonight, those are going to be posted for our elected leaders to respond to, and their answers will become available for you to see. So Susan, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Sure. All right. Thanks, Mariah. We're going to move into the transportation segment with content worked on by all these nonprofit groups. But before we get into their policy reviews, here are some statistics and a map to look at. First, 1 out of 5 city households don't have access to a car, meaning residents must turn to other means of transportation. And while transportation is about mobility and accessing jobs, schools, fun, it's also about making our streets as safe as possible. What the dots on this map represent are all the people who have gotten hurt on city streets between 2013 and 2018. It's showing us that on average, each day, 3 people in Richmond ended up in the hospital or dead, driving, walking, or just getting around our city because of a crash of some kind. So with that, here are the 3 policy reviews from the transportation nonprofits. Number 1, create a Vision Zero action plan and implement the first year of recommendations. Vision Zero can be summed up in one sentence. No serious injuries and fatalities are acceptable, no matter the mode of transportation. Mayor Stoney, from the nonprofits, you got a good progress here. With that good progress rating, where are we on the first year steps of this plan?
Yeah, we're just about finished with our first phase of this plan.
Which is?
Which was, we went to the Safe Streets committee as well. We've had a couple of opportunities for public engagement too. What we need to do moving forward though is the actual work. We did 347 we repaired 347 high visibility crosswalks in the city. Okay. We're going to do 144 again this year. Okay. All right. We need more. We need to work more on infrastructure as well. But also, there are some policies as well that we can work on too. For instance, the closure of sidewalks to pedestrians. Yes. There is no reason that when a person leaves their home, man or woman, to ride to work or to walk to work, that they should not expect to come back home. As a city, as the map shows, we have to do a whole lot better than what we have been doing. We need obviously some help from the state. I was upset with the fact that the hands-free legislation did not pass.
Right.
But here in the city, we have to look at when we're in demolition or renovation of different buildings, how do we ensure that pedestrians have access to their sidewalks?
Right. So that goes into number two. Number two, policy review. Build a comprehensive, thoughtful, and safe network of infrastructure for walking and biking. Mayor Stoney, needs work was the assessment here. And that dovetails into just what you said earlier. While there's been progress on bike lanes, what about the many street and sidewalk closures?
And mind if I add to that as well?
Go ahead.
Because as we continue to grow as a city, there will be growing pains, and that means we will be growing into different neighborhoods who've never seen this sort of growth before. And the sort of pushback, unfortunately, that I think these infrastructure additions get from different communities, I think we just have to do a better job in letting folks know, including them, that this is coming, and it's for the betterment of the community too.
Give you one more street and block where we can work on opening a sidewalk or a protected sidewalk. Broad Street between 3rd and 4th. You have to walk on the street, right across the street from Urban Haynes Suite.
Well, what the Commonwealth is doing with the General Assembly building as well.
All right, and now number 3, policy review. Implement the Richmond Transit Network Plan, which was a reorganization of the bus lines that council supported. And under your watch, of course, this effort was completed. But here's the question. While this plan increased the frequency of buses throughout the city in tandem with the opening of the Pulse, there have been successes and some drawbacks. Is there anything that your staff is keeping an eye on under the new plan?
Yes, we are obviously very pleased with the fact that when you look at the bus rapid transit, the projections were about 3,000, 3,500 people a day. Now we're at 6,000 a day. That's pretty good. And also more and more people are using the system than they did before the transit network plan was initiated. However,
and some of those riders are free ridership too,
that's right,
that you opened up.
VCU and now kids in high school and RPS have access as well with free bus passes too. However, there are certain neighborhoods in the city who deserve more access, and that means that we need more investment as well. We are the largest contributor to GRTC. However, I still believe that we can do more, and I also believe the region can do more. The region, we talk with Henrico and Chesterfield about how we work together well operationally, but when we talk about the big issues that I think drive a competitive region, it's transit and transportation. And I think Henrico and Chesterfield can do better too. We will continue to contribute, and I would say stay tuned to our budget next week.
All right, so that we're moving into policy suggestions for you. Okay, policy suggestion number 1, commit $1 million per year of city funding specifically for pedestrian and bicycle improvements. Number 2, implement fully the Vision Zero action plan, which includes hiring a Vision Zero coordinator and putting money into the budget for it. And number 3, establish a Richmond Department of Transportation. Mayor, some localities have separate transportation departments with directors who take a comprehensive approach and make sure that transportation investments are equitable. Any initial thoughts on that or the other suggestions?
Yeah, my team is still researching the transportation department policy suggestion. I will say, when I walked into the office of the mayor, the people who actually touched transportation in the city of Richmond were even under the same roof. They were all spread out. At least we've now centralized the work of those individuals who do touch transportation.
And they're located where?
City Hall.
In City Hall, but I thought under a certain department. Sorry. Okay.
I mean, all the people in the same place though,
Okay,
for
gotcha.
the first time.
Thank you.
When it comes to my commitment to funding pedestrian bicycle improvements, I'm proud of the fact that we've now created 38 miles of bike lanes in the city. We've got some pushback for projects like the Franklin Street bike lanes, but I think it's the right thing to do. If you want to be competitive and continue to attract people to the city, you have to have that sort of infrastructure. Moving forward, we have to continue to invest in not just this sort of infrastructure, but also the fact that potholes still litter our streets as well, and we have broken sidewalks. We've repaired 3,200 sidewalks in the city since I've been mayor. We've repaired 50,000 potholes in the city as well, and 2,900 alleys too. But we still got to do more, because when I walked into this office, we were 5 years behind on most of that sort of maintenance. So we got a lot of catching up to do.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, audience, we need your help again on voicing what policy suggestions are important to you through some clapping. So number one, $1 million specified in the city budget for bike and pedestrian improvements. Number two, implementing the Vision Zero plan, hiring a coordinator and putting money in the budget for it. And the last one, creating a transportation department that would unify all the work being done in several departments in City Hall and ensure that there are equitable transportation investments throughout the city. Thank you for all those claps, and we have another Mayorathon break presented by the wickedly good satirists over at the Peedmont. Here's their take on some recent news. Can you share one of them?
Good evening. I'm Shamanique Ellison,
And I'm Rachel Marsh.
and welcome to our fake newsroom at the Peedmont, Virginia's most trusted satirical news source.
In an effort to prepare for tonight's Mayorathon, Mayor Levar Stoney reportedly cleared his schedule in an effort to put in a substantial amount of overtime at the gym. He cleared all of his meetings for the week and put up an out-of-office message on his email. Stoney was seen warming up for the event by hitting the weights and blasting "Eye of the Tiger" while doing a Rocky-esque running sequence up the steps of the Capitol building. He told us that while he's proud of many things he's done during his time in office, what he really wants people to remember him by is his ability to bench press at least 270 pounds.
Controversy has struck the Commonwealth today as the Richmond city government has declared a state of emergency to provide funding at a wall at the Fredericksburg border. Reduce the influx of never-ending traffic jams caused by traffic and then Northern Virginian workers, mostly Amazon employees who are fleeing the housing market and consultants named Chad. Despite what critics say, City Council has assured the citizens that the wall will be paid for by Northern Virginia and by a tariff on vanity license plates.
Also in Richmond, VCU has announced plans to purchase the Richmond City Hall building.
For the right price.
According to a statement from VCU, they plan to evict the city government, raise the building to its foundation, and build a low-cost parking deck for commuting students. Plans are also in place to add a Walmart Supercenter and a Chipotle on the ground level.
In local news today, a PBR can found its way into a garbage can off of a porch in the museum district. Sources say that Jason Kenny, a VCU sculpting student, had left it there after a late night of drinking in early November. Jason, in his efforts to throw the can away, end up celebrating by drinking 3 more PBRs and leaving those cans there, quoting, "I'll clean it up later."
A recent poll was conducted by the Flying Squirrels, asking Richmond residents what they believe their mascot Nutsy does during the off-season. 17% of Richmonders said that he day drinks at breweries in Scott's Addition, while 21% believe he tries to find friends on dating apps. However, a whopping 62% said that he writes letters to Richmond metal band Gwar, begging them to let him audition.
And that's all we've got tonight for you folks. I'm Shamanique Ellison.
And I'm Rachel Marsh. To keep up with Virginia's most trusted satirical news source, look for us online at thepiedmont.com and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
And from our fake newsroom at the Peedmont, back to you, Skip.
I guess I'm Skip.
Yeah.
Skip.
Yeah. So thanks for that. So there's nothing fake about that. Please go ahead and follow them on social media. And so at this point in the evening, if you have questions, we ask you to pass them to the middle of the aisle, and there'll be folks coming around to collect them from you. Now, we are certainly appreciative of all of the nonprofits that have helped to put together questions and policy reviews, but obviously we want to hear from you, and we want you to have a chance to ask the mayor questions. So make sure you write one down and give them to our ushers. So, while that is happening, let's transition to our third issue area of the evening, and that is neighborhood and safety. And I think this is an issue that is pressing on many people's minds. And so here are the organizations that worked on this issue. So let's dive into our first policy review. The mayor held community office hours and regularly attends council district meetings, keeping his promise of robust and accessible engagement with community members. And you completed this. So what are your plans to ensure that you continue to engage with neighbors throughout the city, especially folks from our most marginalized communities?
You know, I know this is an old saying, but you know, a great piece of this job is showing up. And there's nothing that gets me excited when I get to visit neighborhoods or visit schools. And I plan on continuing that, you know, the entirety of my term. There are times when I know my staff is like, do you have to go to every school? Do you have to go to visit everywhere? And I'm like, well, that's just who I am. This job has to be done outside the office, even though I know some council people think I should be spending more time in City Hall. I prefer to be out in the community, and that's what my plan is. You can come visit us this June, as I'll start up again my office community hours. They begin in June. I'll do 9 of those, and also we'll likely visit some of our district meetings as well.
What are the time of those office hours for folks who aren't aware?
Yeah, normally they are, I believe, 7 o'clock, 6:30. Just like the start time here. But also what we're going to add to, I think, to the mix that we're definitely exploring is also using social media as well. whether it's Facebook or Twitter, town hall, something along those lines, that also we can answer questions where people are.
And on to our second policy review, the promotion of the Richmond 300 master planning process and encouragement of engagement through that process. And for the audience, the master plan is essentially a blueprint for the city's development. So it tackles everything from land use to housing development, transportation, economic development, amongst other things. So nonprofits said that there's good progress in this area. So with that, how do you plan to keep up momentum to ensure that the entire city is represented throughout this process and perhaps even beyond?
Well, yeah, I am proud of the work currently by the Richmond 300 team. What I've been doing is aligning the master plan with projects like RVA Green 2050 as well. That sort of aligning those goals together, but also you're going to see my impression on the plan, because my team has been working alongside the planning team that's been working on RVA 300 plan. So goal setting, the goals and the vision that will be presented here momentarily, not momentarily, but very, very soon, will be from my office working alongside the planning team too.
And finally, the maintenance and growth of the Office of Community Wealth Building. So this is an office that was created under the previous mayor, Mayor Dwight Jones, to ensure that Richmond's most vulnerable populations have access to quality education, workforce development, safe neighborhoods, and opportunities to be successful. And nonprofits gave you good progress in this area. So even though you inherited this office from the previous administration, what are your plans to make sure the office grows its opportunities available to all residents? And so think about putting a Stoney spin on it. What are some ideas you have?
Well, I think we've already put our spin on it. Number one, we've invested more money in it, more funds in it, so we can hire more people who actually can coach families and just coach individuals, so they can get from a place of one of the critical stages in their life to a place of self-sufficiency. For me, this is about workforce training, right? You know, there are a number of people that, unfortunately, years and years of staying living in the city of Richmond, they may have fallen through the cracks because of our K through 12 system. And now it's our opportunity to actually skill them up, build them up, and give them the sort of access to career-long opportunities. In addition to that, the goals and the mission of the Office of Community Wealth Building is now seen, I think, throughout our operation of City Hall. Each and every department has a role in the deconcentration and the mitigation of poverty. And I will say, the nonprofit world knows my good friend Reggie Gordon, who was at one time with the Red Cross and a number of other nonprofits as well. He is now the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Human Services, and he brings that vision and that mission of Office Community Wealth Building to the entire portfolio.
Thank you. So now moving on to policy suggestions that nonprofits have in this area. The first is to build a strong General Assembly lobbying team in Richmond to advocate for inclusive zoning and policy measures to combat neighborhood displacement. And inclusionary zoning is a way to produce affordable housing through the private market and a tool to keep neighborhoods affordable. And I think as Richmond is growing and changing, that is something that is pressing on many people's minds. So for policy suggestion number 2, in an effort to keep more people in their homes, increase enrollment of legacy homeowners in the city's tax abatement program for seniors, expand beyond annual re-enrollment, and fully fund the anti-eviction efforts outlined in the State of the City speech. And the final policy suggestion is to establish an anti-displacement toolkit that is accessible to Richmonders through the Department of Housing and Community Development or Department of Human Services. And here I want to break down displacement. So this refers to physical displacement that happens from a lack of affordability in housing, but also cultural displacement that happens when the character and the identity of neighborhoods are changed, and economic displacement, which is the loss of access to services and ownership opportunities, particularly for communities of color. So Mayor Stoney, As you hear these suggestions, can you talk about your commitments to minimizing displacement throughout the city, be it through eviction or gentrification, and how do you plan to combat this?
Well, first I'll highlight the first of its kind eviction diversion program in the Commonwealth of Virginia that we rolled out in our State of the City speech. This will, we can clap for that. This will combine the legal world with nonprofits as well. So I have to tip my hat, get a shout out to Central Virginia Legal Aid Society. Also want a shout out to Homes as well, Housing Opportunities Made Equal as well for their work too. Last Thursday I was in a room with 130 pro bono attorneys. And they showed up because of the potential opportunities to work on this eviction diversion program. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't recognize the court system as well for offering us or giving us an opportunity to have attorneys there on site to help divert them from eviction. We recognize that there are a number of families in this city who are living paycheck to paycheck. And a lot of times, folks are getting evicted from their homes for as little as $200 or $300. So you have my commitment that I will fund the program, which will be featured in my budget next week. When it comes to gentrification and changing the aspect and the culture of our neighborhoods, I do believe if you lived in this city in 1957, you should be around to live in your home in 2037 as well. And let me say this, there are a number of people who lived in Richmond when we weren't the hot city. In 1980 and 1990, when these were the rough times in the city of Richmond, they deserve a place in their neighborhoods today. And so I appreciate what the city council did last week in passing an expansion of our abatement program for seniors and for the disabled as well. We can do a better job in communicating the program to our citizens to use it. As a city, I have to balance, as a mayor of the city, I have to balance ensuring that we want to keep people in their homes with also ensuring that the abatement that is received for the right reasons too. So if the DMV can let you actually register for a 2-year cycle, maybe we can look the same way for 3 years, the 3-year cycle, maybe we can look the same way here for this program too.
So let's go back to the inclusive zoning piece a little bit.
Oh, yes.
So our neighbor Henrico County, they have 2 designated lobbyists, and Alexandria has also been successful in passing inclusive zoning measures. So is there a plan to advocate for this, or is it possible to join forces with other cities doing this work to bring inclusive zoning?
Now, I know this is the Mayorathon,
It is.
but my recommendation is one day we have a council-a-thon as well. Because I think some of our council members are going to hear some of this too.
We'll write that down, yeah.
I'm not going to get into the gritty details of, we only have one lobbyist, a paid hand that works for the city council that represents the city. My office does not have a lobbyist. We go lobby ourselves. For instance, we did some lobbying on public education this year, on gun violence too, and also on Vision Zero. Moving forward though, you're right, there are a number of municipalities in this state, like the Norfolks and the Henricos and the Roanoke's, who have similar issues that we can probably lobby together. But I will challenge and say lobbying is not where we need to focus some of our attention to. They're here for 45 or 60 days, but there's an election this November. And with redistricting in the House and the Senate being up for grabs, if we can get a more progressive majority in the House and in the Senate, we will see these sort of bills get out of subcommittee and actually onto the floor. And that's what matters the most.
So now, audience, it's time to hear from you. So policy suggestion number 1, and again, you should get the drill by now. Building a stronger General Assembly lobbying team to advocate for inclusive zoning and policies to combat neighborhood displacement. Let's hear it. Number 2, increase enrollment in the tax abatement program for seniors, and expand beyond annual re-enrollment, and fund anti-eviction efforts. You gotta clap for Mayor Stoney on that one. And number 3, work to establish an anti-displacement toolkit that residents are empowered to use and access.
Can I add as well?
Of course you can. It's the Mayorathon, remember?
Number 4.
Really? I get to?
Yeah,
Okay,
go
all right.
ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
When we talk about the displacement toolkit as well, there's always this request that the city collect delinquent, tax dollars, right? Or properties that might be in delinquency too. And I felt our job as administration is to prevent a home ever falling into delinquency. And at times that means financial literacy on, or just how does a family, if a senior is living in that home, she passes away, the property is passed down to someone who's of kin to her, and they're like, oh wait, this comes with taxes as well? Well, I can't do that. And then the home ends up where? With the city, then ends up in auction. I think we can prevent that with the sort of financial literacy approach, allowing for folks to know, number one, how to pass this home on to the next generation properly as well. And so me and the treasurer as well are working on this, in addition to some of the corporate citizens in town too. I had a conversation the other day with Capital One about their financial literacy efforts in the city and how we can expand those efforts to help those in our communities.
Great. And I think a follow-up to that is, so you've talked about kind of the collaborations around creating this anti-displacement toolkit. The position for the Director of Housing and Community Development remains vacant. Any thoughts on ensuring that someone gets in that seat as soon as possible to be a part of this work?
I think when you look at cities like Richmond, a growing secondary market for some, we are competing not only with those who are coming out of primary markets, but also other secondary markets as well. And what I am working on in City Hall, as was highlighted by the Gallagher compensation study, is to compete with these other cities when it comes to compensating for roles just like this. I'll admit, I've had a few people on the hook, I thought, when it came down to hiring individuals for this office right here, but then they slipped right through our fingers into other localities like, let's say, like a Raleigh. And it's because a lot of times that we don't have the sort of competitive pay model that's necessary to get these sort of talented people to the city of Richmond. I can go to the mountaintop and tell them about all the great things that Richmond had to offer. But at the end of the day, these individuals have to feed their families, put roofs over their heads of their families as well. And so I've urged the city council, you may see this also featured in our budget as well, on how we go about paying the lowest paid workforce in Central Virginia.
Thank you. So as we were talking about neighborhoods, safety obviously goes hand in hand with this. So can you talk a little bit about how the process for selecting the new police chief is going?
Yes, we had 4 community engagement events where we asked the community what you want to see in a new chief. And then we're going to use that information, that feedback from the public survey and from those community meetings to create a job posting, a job description, what we're looking for as a city in the new chief. This will be a national search. We'll also poll members of the police department as well, since this individual will also be their boss too. I just believe in getting feedback from the community on a person who will be involved in the day-to-day operation of keeping our community safe. I plan to have a chief ready to go by July 1. That's my plan. I've already received, because I'm a part of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, I've already received a number of nice little notes from people from all over the United States of America, because we are obviously on the map, and I think a person would want to have the job of chief of police here in the city of Richmond.
Thank you. So once that happens, your department's fully staffed. What does your administration plan to do over the next 2 years to make neighborhoods in Richmond safer?
You know, we are, and I talked about this earlier today, so I'm glad you brought this up. I always want to find the balance of not only keeping our neighborhoods safe, but ensuring that particularly young black men don't end up in the penal system for no reason. That is a necessary balance that any police chief or any department faces, and I think we do a pretty decent job at that. But we also recognize that our job is not just to fight crime and lock people up, but our job also is to lift people up too. And the department has a role in that, but every department also here in the city has a role in that too. Crime in the city currently has been down. Violent crime in the city has been down, but we have to be consistent. And years we have different spikes. I think the department's done a really, really good job. They are fully staffed. We've continued to pay our police department well, but we do have an issue with attrition, right? We have a number of police officers who walk out, who leave Richmond because they can get a more competitive salary in another locality. And when you think about Richmond, we're also competing with VCU, the Capitol Police, the State Police, Henrico, Chesterfield, and Hanover. So we have to continue to stay competitive to keep people here in Richmond in our department.
And so in this area, in February of 2018, you announced that the city will develop an integrated crime reduction strategy. It sounds sexy. But what do you foresee as the results of this? What's the outcome?
You know, I foresee right now about the areas of the city, particularly the big six in terms of the public housing courts now result in about 15% of the violent crime in the city. I want to reduce that. I don't want someone who lives in Creighton Court or in Hillside Court or Gilpin Court, the first thing you think is crime. That's the sort of, that's what I want to see reduced. In addition, I want to get to a point where we have the officers and the residents, the relationship that they can come and give the sort of information necessary for us to solve crimes. The Washington Post recognized us as one of the cities when it comes to closing crimes, but also we have to work day in and day out to ensure that this is the sort of department you want to talk to and give information to. Sometimes it's tough, and sometimes we're able to get that information and keep our neighborhood safe. And that's the sort of relationship, I would say we have a positive relationship with the community, but we're always leaning into doing more. And it's, as I stated earlier, this integrated strategy is just not the police department. And I think our former chief said that many, many times. It's just not the police department. It's every single department that we have in City Hall. When we talk about giving our young people something to do after the bell, that is a part of our strategy to reduce crime. That's why we're moving towards universalizing access to after-school programs at the elementary school and the middle school level. And that's what we're working on, opportunities for our young adults as well. So they don't, when those hours after the bell ring, they have something to do. It's like as if I'm on a conference call, everyone's on a conference call and all said the same thing. If you go to Fairfield Court or if you go to any area in the South Side that's experienced a lot of crime, they say we just got to give our young people more to do outside of crime.
Great, thank you. And so thank you to the nonprofits who helped with this area. And Susan, back to you.
Thank you. So we have another interlude. Our next special guests come from one of Richmond's prized neighborhoods, Highland Park. And please join us in welcoming Lyrics and Beats featuring Aaron Valentine.
Here we go.
How we doing? How we doing?
Good.
I know it's a Thursday, but y'all can do better than that. How we doing? That's better than I shouted for Christmas. Trying to stop the violence in this hood life. Make this hood life to a good life. Make this... Trying to stop the violence in this hood life. Make this hood life to a good life. Trying to stop the violence in this hood life. Make this hood life to a good life. Killing, violence, y'all really need to stop it. It's too much up in these streets. Y'all ain't talking, y'all ain't biting. We don't need no more violence. Let these kids get they knocks. Way too much of them out there, only sticking to one topic. I feel bad for these kids growing up in this world. Gunshots outside, hitting little boys and girls. Steady walking with my pride, looking up into the sky. Kids can't go outside, but it's not the only way to ride. Like Martin King, I had a dream that all this crime stopped. Cause every time I walk outside, shots start to pop. If I had one wish, even to stop this crime. Yet nobody speaking up, happens from time to time. See, I can't look left, can't look right. People get shot day and night. Stop the violence in this world, stop the violence cause it ain't right. So much violence in this world, will it ever stop? Gun stabbing, shooting, killing, man, will it ever stop? Too busy looking at all of our world in a negative way. How about we try to take a look at this in a positive way? See, violence is never the way. Can't even get through the day without seeing someone on the news. Another death, another day. Trying to stop the violence in this hood life. Make this hood life to a good life. Trying to stop the violence in this hood life. Make this hood life to a good life. Trying to stop the violence in this hood life. Make this hood life to a good life. Trying to stop the violence in this hood life. Make this hood life to a good life. Body counts keep rising. Family members keep dying. Am I the only one trying to stop myself from crying? There's too much of this violence. Neighborhoods never in silence. Got cops racing in the distance while we're racing towards someone dying. Gotta push the children towards greatness. Give nods to them like a statement. Around neighborhoods a lot of hatred, but they walk around like it's painless. Trying to stop all the violence in this hood life. I'm trying to make it to where I'm living a good life. I'm trying to make it to where they live in a good life. Cause all that violence in your life is just bad, right? Thank you.
We got talent in Richmond.
We do.
Just a wee bit.
Yeah.
So, lyrics and beats embodies what this final section is about, youth and families. Working on this area were these nonprofit groups, and here are their policy reviews. Number one, implement a plan to lobby the General Assembly for more funding for schools. The word from the nonprofits here was good progress. Mayor Stoney, while the statewide Red for Ed rally was successful, and there was some state add-on money put into the budget, the GA again, the GA again didn't address inequities in the state's school funding formula, which is called the Local Composite Index. As you know, in short, it shortchanges RPS because it factors in the total value of the city's real estate without considering how much of that land is tax exempt or state owned. A whopping $3 billion worth. How can you influence any changes to that formula?
You know, we marched twice. We marched in December to influence the governor's budget, and we saw some progress there. The governor actually presented a budget that would have been beneficial to the city of Richmond and localities like ours. Then we marched with the Red for Ed effort as well, and that's the same day that the General Assembly announced that they're gonna give pay raises to our teachers. So I do find that as being successful. However, once again, the General Assembly has dropped the ball. And despite our efforts to even deliver roses to members of the conferees of the Budget Committee, the budget conferees, I still believe they've fallen short. And let's talk about the LCI. I think the LCI, the Local Composite Index, that formula is just a formula that basically pits localities against one another. Us fighting against our friends in Fairfax and Loudoun and our friends in Norfolk. What we need to be advocating for is funding the true cost of public education. From the bus drivers to the counselors, not this formula, it's the true cost of public education. If you look at the numbers that were released by the Department of Education and the Board of Education, we are falling quite short of what is supposed to be adequacy. To me, a lack of adequacy is also a lack of equity. And that's why we and other localities that feature high levels of poverty are, I think, injured the most in this process. And here's the thing, if we can't change their minds, number one, we should change their seats. And even after we change their seats, we can't change their minds, then we need to use every legal tool in the toolbox to ensure that we get... Meaning? Hey, there are other states around this country who have sued their states, other localities, other children involved in actually taking the state to court to ensure that schools are fully funded. And you know what? The city of Richmond and localities like ours have stepped up to the plate time and time again to fill the gap of the Commonwealth, who has not essentially restored the monies after the recession, basically punting it to the localities. They don't only do this in education, they do this in higher ed as well. And that's why you've seen an increase in salary, in tuitions as well. It's wrong. If we want to be a competitive state, we want to be a competitive city, we have to fund public education.
Okay, Number 2 policy review. Make RPS an explicit priority in economic development. On this one, you got a needs work. Of course, economic development can grow the tax base and in turn support schools among other city priorities. But the issue is, how can the administration map out economic development deals that put schools at the front of the line? For instance, could you ask VCU, who is building like mad, for a payment in lieu of taxes to compensate for some of this lost real estate tax revenue? Which they're called pilots.
Yeah, pilots, yeah, payment in lieu of taxes. There's VCU that also should contribute, but also the biggest offender is the Commonwealth of Virginia. I mean, 30% of our land is tax exempt. We are the capital city. When you add that with what they judge the LCI off of, then we were getting injured twice in the process. When it comes to economic development, when I think about development we've had in the past couple of years, there's been some highlights of some of the corporate citizens that we brought to the city that have stepped up and either sponsored a school or are contributing to the education foundation of Richmond Public Schools. We want more and more of our businesses that we bring to the city to follow that same model. I think about Rosie's that's opening off of Midlothian Turnpike and their contribution to Richmond Public Schools. But we need more. At the end of the day, I appreciate the philanthropy of the corporate sector, but at the end of the day, we need more than philanthropy as a city. To run government, you need revenue.
Right, and again, $3 billion of tax again.
That's right. You need revenue. I think at the World Economic Forum, someone stated that that philanthropy essentially is the icing on the cake from some of our large corporations. At the end of the day, we need revenue to run government and to fund some of these priorities. Number one being public education.
The last policy review item was make the Department of Parks and Recreation a bridge between families and the city's resources by expanding after-school and summer programming. You received a good progress here, and I was wondering if you can share a story perhaps that's come out of this collaboration between Parks and Recreation and the city for this type of programming.
Well, first, this past year we expanded community center hours at 6 of our community centers throughout the city of Richmond. In addition to that, working with the nonprofit sector and the philanthropic sector as well, we have now expanded after-school programming for kids in elementary school and middle school using our programming as well. I think that's a big step to giving kids something to do after school, and the sort of coordination that we've had with the nonprofit sector with our Parks and Recreation program has been really, really good. I have to tip my hat to Chris Frelke, who we brought in from Raleigh, who's done a great job, I think, at Parks and Recreation, and I think there's more to come.
All right, thank you. We'll now move into policy suggestions. Here they are. Establish designated and sustainable funding streams for schools that council can approve and prioritize funding the RPS's strategic plan. 2, tie economic development with opportunities for students 14 and up to have out-of-school apprenticeships, mentorships, and partnerships. And 3, champion early education access by making sure the city is included in expanded state and federal funding, opportunities for the Virginia Preschool Initiative, and Head Start. So Mayor Stoney, what's your initial take on these suggestions, especially finding dedicated funding streams mentioned in number 1? For example, the city of Roanoke designates that schools receive 40% of all property and other local tax revenue at the onset of the year.
Mm-hmm. Which also includes capital as well. So
Okay.
my focus is, we went to bat last year and asked the patrons of restaurants to pay just a little bit more so we can build new schools, because we also know that our facilities in many places are just deplorable. So I'm glad we're building 3 new schools in the city of Richmond. That's a good thing. And I also produced a plan that will allow for the $800 million dedicated to the construction of new schools over the next 20 years, something we've really never had. It means we're going to split the capital budget over the next 20 years with schools. But we got to focus on today and also in the classroom too. That's why the Education Compact, the convening of 19 elected officials, me and the 9 members of the school board and the city council, we've had, I think, some strategic policy discussions. Some have been rough because this is not easy stuff, but we've talked about how we go about sharing the growth of our city with public schools. If the city is growing, so should the RPS budget as well, every year. And what happens in cities like ours is when the bottom falls out in terms of the economy takes a dip, well, the first place they cut is public education. And that funding is never restored. We have to prevent that from happening in case of another economic downturn, and I'm committed to that.
So what are those designated streams? Where can we go?
Well, there's only one stream that's really available, and it's the real estate tax. It's the only stream that's available. And I think that's the tough conversation that I think that the city council and my office will continue to have. In order to make something like this happen, it takes some courage and takes individuals being bold. And I think when Mr. Cameron mentioned the need for more revenue to fund the RPS strategic plan, you saw many of the members shy away from that sort of effort. But that's what sort of takes, because I think that right now, what doesn't make us competitive is our schools. People leave Richmond because of our schools. I want Richmond not to just be a top 10 place for people to visit and enjoy the beer and the art and all that, but a place where people want to live and raise their families long term. And it means it will take courageous decisions, not just from this office, but also from the members of the city council and the school board. That's why we created Education Compact, and I'm still optimistic that we can get there.
Thank you. So to the audience now, we need to have your claps on how you feel about these 3 policy suggestions. Number 1, identify designated school funding stream as well as fund the RPS's $150 million strategic plan. Two, link apprenticeships and mentorships for high school students to economic development deals. And three, advocate for funding to expand early education for more children throughout Richmond.
I think we heard some volume on number 2. All right, so thank you.
I heard number 1, I'm sorry.
I heard number 2. Maybe my ears are closed. I don't know. So thank you to the audience.
Both, yeah, someone said both.
All 3,
Yes.
really.
We can do both. We can do both.
So now we're gonna move on to our Q&A portion of the night, and I'm going to ask for those to be brought out. Thank you, Rupa. All right. Hopefully they're legible. All right, so the first question.
Don't prejudge.
Yeah.
This is legible. It is estimated that 36,325 of Richmond's adults have literacy issues. There is a lot of investment in K through 12 and higher ed, however, not much in adult education. Will we see more funding in the future?
I think that is a real, I'm glad that we've highlighted that. You know, if we recognize that we also have literacy issues in our public schools. The child goes to school and they're taught to read, and then they get home though, and they can't get that reinforcement at home because the same system that their child is in is the same system that failed them as well. And so nowadays we have to do both. I start with City Hall being a model. We have a number of employees who may even be experiencing something like this. And I think you will see this administration lean into such an effort moving forward, because it's not only good for our adults, but it's also good for our children too.
Thank you.
Question 2. An audience member made the following observation. Quote, "Your campaign was run on basic services, not shiny projects," end quote. They want to know, why divert the property taxes from 80 blocks downtown for the north of Broad Navy Hill plan?
So I would be here all day if I was trying to explain what a tax incremental financing district would do.
We have a little time.
A little time, okay.
Yeah.
For me as mayor, it's what I've learned is you got to be able to do both. If we want to be competitive, you have to not only develop your downtown, which we've mentioned already that a lot of the tax-exempt land in the city is downtown. You have to change parking lots into tax generators. And you can do that with investment, using that investment to generate more tax dollars. Right now, that block of land downtown that was mentioned, over 30 years would create about $480 million. With this investment of $1.1 billion over 30 years, we have the potential of creating $1.8 billion with a B in investment. Now, I'm not a mathematician or a math major, but 1.8 billion is a whole lot bigger than $450 million. And the revenue that would spin off of such an investment could then go into our schools and also fixing our core services as well. As I stated earlier, we are a city that's we are in need of revenue. And when you have so much land occupied by the Commonwealth of Virginia that doesn't generate revenue, we have to get into the game and do that ourselves. Now, I feel confident that as a secondary market, we're going to continue to attract investment. But we also need to be ones that we also need a catalyst to generate that revenue as well. And so using that revenue, I've stated already that half of the revenue that was spent off of Navy Hill over the course of the next 20 to 30 years should go to public education. And not in a resolution form where it's just a promise. We should make that concrete over the course of the next 30 years. It's necessary.
So there are a lot of projections in that plan.
Yep.
And some of that money, of course, will go $600 million to pay off bonds as well. When will we see this plan? When will the public be able to see this plan?
So we're talking about a $1.4 billion plan. We're not talking about a $1.4 million plan. And when you talk in terms of billions of dollars, it's going to take more than 4 months to actually create. So our attorneys, along with the attorneys for the developer, are at the table because at the end of the day, I want to ensure that we protect those taxpayer dollars. If the projections were not to materialize, I don't want that coming out of the pocket of city residents. That should be be in the bag of those who choose to develop in the city. And until we get that agreement that protects the city residents and the city itself, then you will not see such a plan go to city council. But once the conversations we've had at the table that we've negotiated, the agreement that I said that we are in agreement with in principle, and I said in November, once that is memorialized in those documents and be placed before the city council, you will see that plan. So I said earlier that we would create 700 affordable housing homes. I said that we would create 21,000 jobs, that they would hire former offenders, things of that nature. If that agreement can be memorialized and put into ordinances that can then submit to the city council, then that's when I will submit those ordinances.
So we're going to wait a couple months.
Hey, you know what? You can't rush. I think in the past we've rushed opportunities like this. We have to do our due diligence. We have to dot our I's and cross our T's if we're talking about a $1.4 billion project.
Another question?
Yeah. So you've already talked about sidewalk closures, but an audience member wants to know more. This week, a person died crossing Broad Street near sidewalks closed for construction. When will your administration require safe pedestrian corridors as requested through a resolution passed by council 11 months ago now?
You will see policies from this administration on sidewalk closures. I look out my window every day at the building, the General Assembly construction, and that's the sort of stuff that the Vision Zero aspect of my job keeps me up at night. Like I said, I appreciate the cranes in the sky and the cones in the road, but I can't take another fatality that could be prevented. However, we also have to balance the fact that not every project in the city is the same. There are projects that are demolition, like places along Broad Street, which is essentially a huge hole in the ground with debris that could just be flying out that could be that could create liabilities. But in addition to that, there are renovations that go on in places like Gray Street, which is not the same quarter as Broad. Okay. You take a lane of traffic away on Broad, then everything is backed up. You take a lane away on Gray Street, or you keep the sidewalk open. There is more sidewalk on Gray Street than it is. So there's not one size fit all for such a piece of legislation or any policy. So my team is going to explore that, and where we are going to prioritize keeping the pedestrian safe, because there's no reason why a person crossing the street should lose their life.
And do you have a timeline for when you anticipate that to happen?
I hate to put a timeline on it because I want to make sure we get this right. But you will see something from this administration.
Okay. Yeah. Because of the dense way in which they are built, the Fan, Jackson Ward, Churchill have the lowest carbon emissions, but our zoning laws prevent this type of dense development elsewhere. When will you change zoning to allow more climate-friendly development?
I'll say that again.
The entire question. I can. Because of the dense...
You don't have to.
No, I totally can. I can. Because of the dense way in which they're built, the Fan, Jackson Ward, Church Hill have the lowest carbon emissions, but our zoning laws prevent this type of dense development elsewhere. When will you change zoning to allow more climate-friendly development?
I agree with that sort of development. I believe in density and I believe in growth. At the end of the day, the Richmond of 20 years ago will not be the Richmond of the future. And that means I have to have a commitment from my friends on a city council as well of this sort of development. I think folks saw the sort of pushback this administration received when development started occurring in Northside. I get pushback from a number of city council members every day about new developments occurring, dense developments occurring in their districts. But that's the sort of development I believe. And right now we kind of do this in a spot check or sort of way with the SUP process. I think Richmond 300 presents a way that we can actually present a plan that shows this sort of development throughout the city. At the end of the day, we are less dense than we were in the 1950s.
Time for one more question? Okay. The auditor's report comparing 7 localities' spending per capita for fiscal year 2017 showed Richmond number 7 in per capita spending on parks and recs, cultural, libraries, etc. No matter how much we spend on schools, we will never see the closing of the achievement gap if we continue to underfund accessible enrichment opportunities. Can we be sure that schools first, this doesn't make sense. Can we be sure that schools first will not be schools only?
I believe in both. You have to do both. You have to offer rich enrichment inside the classroom. I think when you see Mr. Cameron's strategic plan, he speaks about rich, engaging, fun academics. But also you have to offer that outside the classroom as well, whether it's funding our libraries or also access to great parks too. I believe you have to do both. And I don't believe those numbers in the audit report capture the more funding that we've added to Parks and Recreation since I've been mayor.
Well, right, it was fiscal year 2017.
That's right.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So unfortunately, I think that is all the time that we have for questions from the audience.
You mean we can have one more beer and hang out,
It's all the time. So just to review the next steps with you. So the 12 policy suggestions that you heard this evening, again, those are going to be sent to the mayor. And he and council will have 2 weeks to respond to those. And again, those are going to be made publicly available at, if you have pens, richmondmag.com/Mayorathon2. So make sure you write that down.
You're sending them to city council as well.
Oh, yes.
And city council and his office hours that start in July?
June.
They start in June. So there are a number of ways to access Mayor Stoney.
And I will present my budget to the city next Wednesday
week.
at 3 o'clock at City Hall.
So yeah, again, all city council members were invited, and they will all get a list of these policy suggestions.
That's
So
what I'm
look for
talking
them.
about. We all wear the
So-
same jerseys. We're on the same team.
But you have a helmet. All right.
I know.
All right.
Sometimes I need it.
So Mayor Stoney, we thank you for your time this evening. It was a first-time event, so we thank you for taking a chance with us on it. We look forward to next year's Mayorathon Candidates Forum.
Oh, wait.
Will you be joining us?
That's right.
In a blue suit?
I plan on being there.
You plan on being there? On the stage? So, on the stage for the candidate?
I'm not here to break any news here tonight, but I do.
We want to break news.
I bet you do. You're in the news business. I get it.
So you'll be there.
I plan on being there. I mean, unless something happens. I mean, I plan on being in attendance.
All right. To the nonprofits who helped put this together, thank you. And thank you to our host, the ICA. For folks who want to know more about the city's public engagement process, all of the nonprofits have information in the lobby. We thank you for coming tonight. Have a wonderful evening, and come outside and join us at the bar. Thank you again.
Thank you.